I'm Don Gray. With us today is the artist Janet Fish, who will be showing October 16th, I believe it is, Janet, is that correct? At the Cornblee Gallery in New York City, of course. And we'll be looking at some of Janet's paintings in just a moment. Janet, can you give us a little bit of your background? How did you arrive in New York? Where did you come from, and where did you study, and so forth?
Well, I was raised in Bermuda, and then I went to Smith College, and from Smith I went to Yale Art School. And then I spent a couple of years here and there, and then I came to New York from there. Just moved in and decided to try my luck.
And how was your luck? How did it work out?
It took a while. I got here in about 64, 65, around then, and if luck meant getting into a regular gallery, then I was in two cooperatives galleries, and then I went with Cornblee in about 1970.
Did you find the cooperative gallery experience a helpful one? I know a lot of artists, they can't get a regular gallery, so they go in with other artists in that type of gallery. Was it helpful to you, do you believe?
I thought so. I mean, I learned a lot about what you had to do. I mean, what was,
the business
aspects of it. I found that it was a nice communal kind of thing, that people were in the gallery. We always sort of seemed to back each other up, and were supportive at openings, and that counts for a lot, I think.
It sure does.
And helped each other with the shows. And so I thought it was a good experience, and people saw the work. Even when the first one was down on Grand Street, it was called Hours, and I don't know that too many people, except for a handful of artists, even knew about it. But it still was a good thing.
And this was before Soho became as
this is,
fashionable or acceptable as it is now.
I don't think Soho was.
There wasn't a Soho? Okay.
Soho is a new thing.
Yeah. How did you support yourself? How did you pay the rent on your loft and buy your materials?
Well, I had a lot of different part-time jobs. I worked as a pediatrician's assistant, and I painted soap once for Bloomingdale's, and I worked in a real estate office. They fired me pretty fast. I couldn't type, which was a great handicap, and I couldn't spell. That knocked a lot of jobs out. And I worked in an art supply store, too. And then I finally got a teaching job. I started getting teaching jobs and losing teaching jobs.
Did you become involved in college politics? I mean, sometimes there's art department politics at the new arrival.
No, I don't think I've ever been any place long enough to be involved in the politics. Most of the jobs I've gotten have been have been temporary jobs. I've always, when I took the job, I know that there's most jobs I have, I know are semester, 7 weeks, 5-week jobs.
How about being a woman? Has that been a problem in either your educational career or your
it was a problem in educational career. It happened that because my mother is an artist and stuff, that a lot of that was sort of going over my head. I think it was destructive in a way, I mean, when I was at Yale, I know people always say, oh, you're just here to get married, to find a husband. Well, I knew I wasn't in my art, so that I would kind of let that wash over. And they tended to shuffle us off into the less interesting courses that they had to fill. I remember one time I was forced to take drafting because he said it'd be like sending me to Elizabeth Arden's.
You're kidding. Yes. Is this the chairman of the art department?
Yeah, at the time, the chairman at the time.
Oh, that's awful.
And things like that happened, so that was annoying. And then it was difficult. The teaching jobs, which are, of course, the plum jobs, were really not available at the time I graduated to women. And that's one reason why I did go in for all these other kinds of jobs.
You were mentioning earlier that there was a job book at the college?
Oh, yeah. It seemed like everyone was always finding out about these jobs. I could never figure it out. And then one time I saw a friend of mine looking at it. I said, oh, hey, I'll look at that book. And then the secretary was over there said, oh, that book's not for you. And then they said, well, apply to women's schools around the state, you know, get jobs there.
The male students could use the job book and find
Well,
leads?
they were,
is that how it worked?
yeah, the excuse, as I heard it later, was, oh, well, even my own alma mater wasn't hiring women. That they didn't want to send us there because we'd be turned down anyway. In other words, they wanted to send their best students.
Yeah, a bit of a rationalization, to say the least. How about in the art world? Does it help to be a woman, or do you feel that there?
I don't think it helps at all. It's even now, I think there tends to be a bit more respect paid to a man, but things are better now. There are galleries still that I think don't show very many women and probably wouldn't, but they tend to be a bit better. I think that for a long time, I think that now that the women's movement here, that things that are more possible for women, including painting in certain kinds of ways. I think that, for instance, that if Rothko had been a woman, I don't think we would know about his work. And I think that women had to prove themselves in a way that men you weren't given the benefit of the doubt. You could go in and prove yourself, but you didn't have that comfort in the beginning when most people are very insecure.
Well, you're talking about the myth of the masculine way of painting, and that a woman just by nature can't approach the, as you were saying, toughness, I believe
Tough
is a
painting.
word.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that toughness, a tough-looking painting is one more illusion that you can do. If you want your painting to look tough, you can paint a tough-looking painting. But I think women might have to paint a tough-looking painting. I mean, I don't think so. I mean, now there are many people are deliberately not doing that as a point. You know, there are women.
As a stylistic way
There are women
of
who are
working,
who are seeking to paint.
I see what you're saying.
Paintings that are not masculine.
I see what you're saying.
I'm not sure that that's possible either. I think we're all a little tough and a little not tough.
Yeah, I've never quite been able to figure out just what masculine painting was supposed to be like, or a feminine. I think it's there.
I
don't
think
think
that's
they're too
a very
applicable.
ambiguous kind of issue.
I think so too. Why don't we see? We're talking about Janet Fish's painting, and she's showing at the Cornbly Gallery starting October 16th. Maybe we can zero in on some of these pictures. And the way we have planned is to, we go over there? Okay. We'll look at one of Janet Fish's recent pictures, and then we'll take a look at some of her early ones and show how they developed. So if we could get a close-up of these pictures here, move right in on them. And which camera are we going to use for the pictures? Over here? Okay. Okay, we need a close-up of the picture. There we go. There we go. Let me, okay.
That's painted last spring.
And as people can see, it's goblets and glasses and so forth. How large is this, Janet?
This is about, it's about 60 inches high, I think. It's fairly tall.
And since we're looking at black and white, what would be the color of
this painting is grayish in tone. The coloring is very subdued in this particular picture. It's a kind of a rainy day, that kind of light that you have, and the glasses are very subdued.
Now, in your studio, you do set them in the window and catch the various lights of the day, isn't that right? And reflections of buildings across the street, the loft buildings and so forth. What are you trying to express in these pictures? would you say?
Well, there's a lot of things. I have a feeling about a kind of paint surface. I want a kind of energy. I want the paintings to have the activity of the mark, the quality of the light. When I set these things up, I spend a couple of days just moving them around until the whole situation clicks and I feel good about it. And so I want. There's a kind of a feeling that I have about the way the light plays through the objects that I want to happen in the painting.
Would it be considered in an impressionistic sense? I mean, or is it?
It's not impressionistic as I understand the word. I intend the mark to be very specific to the form and specific to the color. The glasses themselves are highly active and refractive, and I've chosen that subject, for that reason.
For that reason.
Because I want a very kind of glittering I want an all-over surface and everything.
Okay.
This is an older painting.
How long ago was this painted, and what is it, and how did you evolve from this?
This is from 1968, I believe. I don't have any black and whites of anything earlier than this. And I had been painting vegetables, like kind of, let's say 5 feet or so, vegetables and stuff.
Large. 5 foot size,
yeah, I was like very involved in like presence and volume and a kind of light, the kind of light that plays on volumes. But then I started painting packages. Was originally out of a desire to get away from a kind of standard still life format, which I found irritating. And I wanted, so I picked up the package, but the package then, for that reason, I thought, oh, this will solve the problem, and we'll eliminate it totally. But then I got really involved in the reflections, something I hadn't really counted on, and the way they were just slipping and sliding across these solid volumes. And so I painted quite a few pictures of these things.
Now, what are they specifically? It may be hard. Are they bread wrappers and so forth?
No,
what
this
are
is,
they?
it's hard to see, but it's apples in one of those supermarket packages.
With
the reflections
on it. Yeah.
They were all things like that.
I
don't believe I brought any more photographs of them, but I painted them for a couple of years.
Okay, let's see what number. Moving on in time.
And then this is, I believe that was from about 69 or 70. And I had gotten tired of vegetable colors and things, and I was just moving on, and I'd looked at some honey and seen the kind of way the light was going through it, and I thought it was pretty exciting. So I started going still to the supermarket and finding these bottles, and I like the way the labels would flip around behind, what they did, how the distortion and the change that the bottle did to the label and the kind of.
Well, in looking at these pictures, and obviously they're, extremely well painted. I think people can tell that from the pictures that we're seeing here. Have you felt like the Lone Ranger in an abstract world, in a sense? I mean, surely the emphasis in the art world has not been on realism.
Well, it certainly wasn't a few years back. And then, of course, at that time, a lot of my friends really were not figurative painters, so that I felt a bit peculiar at that time when I was painting images really for my own private reasons. It was a way for me to get away from the words that I'd heard, those voices and all that training and voices.
The theories and
the theories and the words,
and
I thought that in this way I could just stare at something, and I just wanted to find out what was there, like what was there when I got past the cliches and really looked at something. And I still find it's kind of pretty interesting that when I set something up, I still don't really even know everything I'm seeing.
I wonder if you're not saying something that is of revolutionary importance in our time.
I don't know.
Don't you think so? I mean, it occurs to me that for the whole 20th century, we've been concerned with abstract, unreal values in a sense, certainly non-visual values. And here you are saying that you're trying to almost rediscover the world in a sense, in your own right here. I mean, this is heady stuff as far as I'm concerned.
Well, it's what keeps me paint. One of the things that kind of keeps me painting is that kind of discovery, chance of discovering things outside of myself. But I think that, in a sense, a kind of investigation, a very close investigation to things, is something in an American tradition of painting. There's some of those earlier American still life paintings are Peel or names are leaving my head.
I can't think of any either. So let's generalize, shall we?
But there were some. There's a very good book out on American still life, and I found it really fascinating. Yeah. Some of the paintings in the thing and things I've seen here or there.
It's been my feeling. Perhaps we could talk about these whiskey bottles, and are they whiskey? Yeah, Smirnoff vodka.
Yeah, vodka, yeah.
Vodka. Are these again in your studio window?
Yeah, these were set up in another studio against the sky. And what I liked there was the lace work of the embossed patterns on the bottles, and they were catching little sparks and like prisms of color in them. And I thought I grew very fond of those bottles.
Is this will this be in the show, or is this still,
no,
are we still early?
We're still in old paintings.
Okay, well,
yeah.
let's
and this is another old painting.
Okay, should we?
That's Tequila, yeah. And then this is an old painting in between.
Well, I don't want to run too fast, but I want to make sure that we have the opportunity to see
some of those, yeah.
To see your.
This is from about 3 years ago, and was a painting that I did under fluorescent light. I normally use daylight, but this is half daylight and half fluorescent light together, which you can't see in black and white, but made a very different kind of color.
Did you get the blue tones and the warm orange, pink tones from the lights? Did it give that kind of coloration?
It gave a colder light.
Colder
the fluorescence did. So it was just interesting to me. I don't usually use those lights.
You're painting with a brush here on all of these, and I understand people are asking you, why don't you use an airbrush, Janet?
Oh, well, actually, several people have come right out.
They actually do.
One gallery I went to early on told me that he'd be interested if I clean them up.
Clean them up. Leave
and then some people once came from Germany for Documenta once a few years ago, and they were worried about my future, and they suggested that I buy an airbrush and use photographs. For my own good. But I did have a little bit of that, but people really leave you alone about it now.
What's the problem with the art world, do you think? That it seems to my point of view, maybe you won't agree, but it seems to emphasize the artificial and the impersonal. And the photograph removes you from reality, puts you in an artificial world, and certainly the airbrush is an artificial tool that isn't as closely related to a person's feelings and responses as a brush is.
I think that I think some people have wanted to have a very cool thing, and a thing in which the artist was out of the picture. That's not my particular choice. I think I want to know the artist in the painting. I want to know about a kind of response. But also, I mean, the photograph is used extremely differently by different people. I mean, they're very different kinds of attitudes to it. The thing I object to about the airbrush for myself is the surface. It's a repelling surface that pushes you away from a painting, and I wanted something that would draw you in, and also the mark for me is very important.
The mark of the brush, the brush stroke, is that what you mean?
The surface. I want that kind of sensual kind of surface that comes with paint. And I was particularly conscious of it. I was looking at one of Sylvia Mangel's paintings, which is painted, though very, very, very thinly, but it was really very beautiful painting of some tiling, and I thought, oh, part of the whole thing was just coming up and seeing the paint.
What is it in modern life or in the modern art, the emphasis in the art world that seems to crave this cold surface? To me, it's cold.
Well, I think it's something that comes out of there's always a playing, or all the different areas in which everybody seems very different, but they aren't. Now I think there's between a kind of a more conceptual orientation towards painting, which the idea is in a sense takes precedence over the execution, and that's something that can come out of a kind of a relationship to that. I think I think the idea of using like a postcard and having the artist's hand be absent is a very conceptual thing. And
very cold too. I mean, I can't see why we're looking for coldness. It seems to me that it just reflects some of society's impersonality when I run into things like that. I mean, that's the way I've justified it in my own mind. I don't, to try to figure out why has much of the art of the 20th century been so impersonal. I mean, I think Mondrian is impersonal. I don't know whether you have a feeling of passion in his work or not.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of passionate obsession there in the mark, and you go up and look at the things, where they're painted, that very deliberate building up of paint on the thing. I find very, I think something that makes him in particular like very much stronger than some of the other people who were working like him at the time. There's a very dynamic kind of surface tension.
Just the handling of the paint you're talking about?
Yeah, and the balance, the very deliberate balancing of colors.
But what happens when we compare him to, say, Soutine or something? I mean, doesn't he automatically fall into the ice box and the door slams? I mean,
suppose
do the tactile values still hold
another
up?
person there, yes.
I mean, just comparing, but I've thought in looking at some of your pictures, and perhaps we can discuss this or some of the others, that you choose a very cool subject, but you treat it with a certain amount of passion, if I can use the word, in your technique and really the way some of the buildings twist and turn in the reflections. To me, they're very emotional when you get up close to them.
These glasses, I don't know, it always gets tricky there, I mean, like glasses are glasses.
No.
I mean, neither cool nor anything. They're things, they're objects that I particularly like for one reason or another. Sometimes I like them simply because they're very bland and comfortable, and some of them I like because they're glamorous.
Yeah,
and
elegant, or
elegant.
Just the way
They have a color that I like about them. But I think I'm very tuned to the kind of physical aspects of these glasses. And then the kind of way that they're transparent, play with each other, the kind of dance they have with each other.
That's sort of what I'm talking about, I think, is, I mean, they do seem to dance. I mean, obviously there's a compositional relationship of the glasses, but this is just my reaction to your pictures, that I don't know if we could even get closer than this, or if the camera focal length has been reached. But when you look at those smaller, twisting, sinuous shapes in there, they're really quite emotional shapes, just by the nature of just the way you've seen the reflections. I don't know whether I'm imposing on your thinking, but it's my reaction when I look at it.
Well, I mean, I do have a lot of, there's a kind of, just the whole gesture and the energy of the thing has to be something to do with that. Yeah, and then the color, which is, doesn't show here.
What color would be in this?
This is basically a kind of yellow painting. There are yellow walls behind it, and then there's a violet glass, and there's some rain back there, which you can't really see in this particular painting.
Falling, you mean, in the background?
The rain is hitting the window.
Oh, it's hitting the window? Off to the left there? Is that running down the side?
It's running down the window.
Yeah, I can see that.
That happened because I'd set the thing up and was going to paint it. I wanted to paint something on a cloudy day, and then when the rain started hitting the window, I thought it would look pretty good.
Yeah, well, it's right up your alley, if I might say so. I mean, it would intrigue you. I can understand that and see that. This seems almost earlier than...
No, this is also some from this year, with some windows there. It is earlier than that one that you just looked at. And those are depression, well, there is at least one depression, so-called depression glass in there.
What is a depression glass?
I thought they were talking about, well, I wasn't sure what everyone kept saying, depression glasses. I've been borrowing glasses from my friends, but depression glass is a kind of glassware made during the Depression, a cheap glassware. I was wondering for quite a long time.
So it's fairly self-explanatory.
Yeah.
And then here the final picture that we have. A question that I feel that I must ask, have you ever painted the figure, or do you feel that you will, or do you feel that you have a special feeling for the light and reflection?
I did paint the figure for a couple of years. I was painting portraits and like people in rooms, like environments. I found that I was taking a long time in the painting, and I couldn't count on the models to be there, and I didn't like having, I found someone in the studio disturbing. And there's something about painting a still life, there's a kind of contemplation that is not present when you're painting a figure. I think it's more for a more sociable person who's painting than myself. And I think you go off into a kind of a reverie when you're painting a still life. You're thrown completely away from everything else into this world.
We have 1 minute. There is a tension set up in a studio with the presence of other people. I mean, it interferes with me. I mean, that's why I'm asking it. I kind of thought that you might say that, you know, that it's a chance to, at leisure and with deep commitment, just look and try to discover what's there in a sense.
Yeah, I sort of stop. I mean, as I'm painting, I'm not. I'm thinking, but I'm thinking often without words for long periods of times. And but once someone's in the studio, I am aware of them. I think of them, even when I don't want to. So my concentration is broken.
Okay, thanks a million. We've been talking to Janet Fish, who really, I think, has said some revolutionary talk here, in the sense that what I think is going to happen in the art world is what she's doing. She's looking at reality and trying to rediscover actually the substance of it. The program is Artist and Critic, and I'm Don Gray. Thanks very much for watching.